After today's phone conversation between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky, it can finally be said that the American president's team has started to act in favor of Ukraine. Kyiv and Washington will work on strengthening the protection of Ukrainian airspace. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced this following his phone conversation with the President of the United States. In particular, there are initial agreements on supplying Ukraine with additional Patriot air defense systems and more. And here I want to point out right away that this is no longer just talk. The fact is that today Trump also had a phone call with the Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz. And Merz's office later confirmed that Germany is holding intensive negotiations with the United States of America to provide Ukraine with Patriot systems and missiles for them. Simply put, Germany will purchase air defense systems from the United States for Ukraine, and Trump agrees with such a deal. The publication states that after the Trump-Zelensky conversation, Trump's team informed the office of the President of Ukraine that the answer was yes. Now Trump is ready to increase the supply of air defense systems to Ukraine. But this decision was preceded by a statement from Donald Trump that there is nothing left to negotiate with the Russian dictator Putin, since he is absolutely incapable of making agreements. And Trump admitted for the first time that Putin is not going to stop this bloody war. My name is Alexei Pechi. Today is July 4th. Let's discuss this topic. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, leave a like, write any comment, and be sure to subscribe to my Telegram channel. The link to it is in the description of this video. There we publish breaking news as it comes in. So, the President of the United States of America, Donald Trump, and the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, had a phone conversation today on July 4th. The conversation lasted about 40 minutes, and as they said in Washington and Kyiv, it was a good talk. In particular, Trump and Zelensky discussed the escalation of Russian strikes on Ukraine and the supply of air defense systems to Ukraine. Later, Zelensky officially announced that Kyiv and Washington would work on strengthening the protection of Ukrainian airspace. According to the Ukrainian president, he had a very important and useful conversation with Trump. Zelensky also congratulated President Trump and the entire American people on Independence Day, which is celebrated today, July 4th. And now, the first quote from Zelensky: "We in Ukraine are grateful for all the support provided, which allows us to protect people's lives and our independence. We have done a lot together with America, and we support all efforts to stop the killing and restore a normal, stable, and dignified peace. A worthy deal for peace is needed, and Ukraine supports the American proposals." So, what happens next? The President of Ukraine said. He spoke with the American leader about the current situation, particularly about Russian airstrikes, and more broadly about the situation on the front. Quote, "President Trump is very well informed. Thank you for this attention to Ukraine. We discussed the possibility regarding air defense and agreed that we will work on increasing the protection of the skies. We agreed on an appropriate meeting between our teams. We also spoke in detail about the possibilities of the defense industry and the opportunities for joint production. We are ready for direct projects with America, and we believe that this is extremely necessary for security, especially when it comes to drones and related technologies." The leaders of the two countries also discussed mutual procurement and investments, exchanged views on the diplomatic situation, and on joint work with America and other partners. Well, and here I'll briefly remind you that not so long ago, namely on June 25th, Zelensky and Trump have already held a meeting during the NATO Leaders Summit in The Hague. And that meeting lasted more than 40 minutes. And later, Zelensky said that he and Trump discussed the issue of supplying systems. But paradoxically, just a few days after that conversation between Trump and Zelensky in The Hague, it became known that United States Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth decided to suspend the supply of important components and types of weapons to Ukraine, including Patriot Advanced Capability, 3 missiles for anti-aircraft missile systems. Hegseth made this decision despite the fact that an analysis conducted by high-ranking United States military officers showed that the package of weapons that was supposed to be sent to Ukraine but was stopped did not threaten the combat readiness of the United States of America. In general, I talked about Peter Hegseth's decision in more detail in a separate episode. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and wait for this episode, because this is really a major scandal that is currently being discussed in Washington. Of course, the Kremlin was pleased with Hegseth's decision. And now the press secretary of the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin, Dmitry Peskov, stated that stopping the supply of weapons to Ukraine for self-defense against Russian bloody attacks would bring the end of the war closer. Next, I will quote Peskov. As far as we understand, the reason for this decision was empty warehouses, a shortage of these weapons in the Pentagon's warehouses. In any case, the less weapons are supplied to Ukraine, the closer the end of the special military operation. And right after that, Russia attacks peaceful Ukrainian cities today. And as reported by the air forces of the armed forces of Ukraine, Russia set a new anti-record today for the use of Shahed-type strike drones in a single night. As stated by the spokesperson of the Ukrainian Air Force, Yuri Ikhnat, and I quote, "The enemy is attacking with a large number of UAVs, 550 aerial targets, in total more than 330 strike Shaheds specifically. This is the largest number the enemy has used in a single attack. But quite a few targets have also been intercepted. To repel the attack, Ukraine used all available means, including aviation, anti-aircraft missile forces, and ground forces air defense. Electronic warfare systems are operating throughout Ukraine, as well as mobile fire groups. No one is writing them off. They account for a significant percentage of shootdowns. And today in particular, it's worth noting the work of the unmanned aerial vehicle interceptor operators. Dozens have been destroyed by this innovative interception method. But let's get back to Trump's promises to provide Ukraine with new air defense systems. And here we have a very important point. I've already mentioned that from now on the United States doesn't want to provide direct aid to Ukraine, but they're quite willing to sell weapons to Ukraine for European money. And today, Friedrich Merz's office confirmed that Germany is holding intensive negotiations with the United States of America to provide Ukraine with Patriot systems and missiles for them. This was reported by the German government representative Stefan Cornelius. It is noted that such negotiations began because Russia is increasingly striking Ukraine with missiles and drones, and the United States suspended arms deliveries this week. Today, journalists asked Cornelius whether Chancellor Friedrich Merz's government is negotiating with the United States to purchase Patriot missiles for Kyiv. To this, the spokesperson said that there are various ways to meet Ukraine's air defense needs. Next is a quote. "I can confirm that there are indeed intensive discussions on this issue. One of the options being considered is purchasing missiles from the United States and then transferring them to Ukraine." And it's important to note here that right after his conversation with Zelensky, Donald Trump called the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz again to discuss specifically the issue of purchasing Patriot air defense systems and missiles from the United States of America. And now we can already say that the governments of Germany and the United States are currently negotiating such a semi-secret arms agreement for Ukraine. And as the publication previously reported, the German government is urgently working on an emergency solution to provide Ukraine with new air defense systems and a sufficient number of missiles. It was noted that Berlin is awaiting the consent of United States Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth to transfer at least 2 systems for which Germany is ready to pay even today. According to Bild journalists, the request was sent to Hegseth several weeks ago. In particular, German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius submitted such a request to the United States back in May. The idea is simple. Germany is ready to buy Patriot systems at full price and immediately transfer them to Ukraine. Before that, unfortunately, Ukraine unsuccessfully tried to purchase, not ask for, but purchase Patriot systems directly from the United States and then turned to Germany for help, because negotiating with Trump's team has become problematic. And now there is hope that the United States will finally resolve this issue. Well, the rhetoric of Donald Trump towards the Russian dictator Putin also speaks in favor of a positive decision. Yesterday, let me remind you, Trump and Putin had a phone call. And now United States President Donald Trump said that he was very disappointed after his conversation with the Kremlin dictator. According to him, the Russian president doesn't look at all like someone who wants to end the war against Ukraine. That's why, according to Trump himself, he decided to urgently call Zelensky and Merz to discuss how to proceed and what to do next. And here I'll quote Trump. "Honestly, I feel like Putin just isn't there anymore. He wasn't present during the conversation. I don't see that he wants to stop, and that's very bad. He doesn't look like someone who wants to end this war. That's why on Friday I'll be speaking with President Zelensky. That was Trump's statement last night, right before today's call with Zelensky and Scholz. So I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like.